I've been laid off before. I get it. It's tough. That's what a lot of people struggle with in marketing, particularly. I was diagnosed with cancer, and that was just a really pivotal time in my life. So I think with any creator, the number one barrier, the number one challenge or problem is.
That was Dilara Casey, marketing leader, content creator, and founder of Totally Employable. Dilara has been featured in publications such as the Huffington Post, Mashable, BuzzFeed, and her thought leadership has been featured in Columbus CEO Magazine, the American Marketing Association, and the Word of Mouth Marketing Association. Her work has also caught the eye of USA Today Show, USA Today, and Politico and Forbes magazine, to name a few. In this episode of Marketing by Design, expect to learn how Dilara approaches marketing herself, the best career advice for job seekers in marketing, advice for going through hard times and staying on track, and stay for her controversial takes on Peloton. My name is Andy. This is entry number 74 of the Marketing by Design podcast powered by AMA Columbus. I'm so glad to be talking to you today. Without further ado, let's dive on in. Keeping up with marketing trends and leveling up your career doesn't have to be overwhelming, so don't go at it alone. Welcome to the Marketing by Design podcast powered by AMA Columbus. Join host Andy Milligan every Tuesday as you and I dive into the info that you need to know as a marketer. Whether your goal is to land a job, grow that network, make more money, or level up your career in marketing, you are in the right place. Come for the actionable info, stay for the pressing conversations with industry marketing leaders, and walk away the best equipped marketer ready to dominate your niche. I'm so excited to talk to you today. Let's go. So, what does your normal kind of Monday routine look like when you get started? I know you said you just did a Peloton workout, but is
Yeah.
that traditional Monday? How big are you into morning routines?
I try to be better. Well, it's time change this weekend, so it was nice because I felt more energized to wake up because we gained an hour. So yeah, I like to wake up. My kids go to school pretty early, so I get up, get them out the door, walk the dog, come home, and get a Peloton workout and showered, and I'm ready to go before 9. So that's usually how the mornings go for me. It's just a good way to start the day with some movement, cup of coffee, all the things.
Nice. Yeah, Peloton, I don't know, I haven't tried it, and it's kind of like pickleball for me. It's one of those things where I'm almost scared to try because I feel like I'll like it and it'll bring out my competitive side.
Yeah.
But I've heard a lot of good things. I know the people who do it consistently are big super fans. So
Yeah.
are you like a loyalist, or are you just kind of like a
No.
when I have time sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I fitness has always been a really important part of my life. So when I was in college, I didn't gain the freshman 15, I gained like the freshman 50. And so then I really took my health and wellness seriously. And I became a
Hmm.
group fitness instructor for about 10 years. So fitness was
Nice.
always kind of an important part of not just like my mental and physical health, but also part of community for me. So I like the Peloton because
Hmm.
there's community embedded in it, but it's like on demand, right? So if I get on
Hmm.
my bike at 9 in the morning, there's people on. If I get on at 9 at night, there's people on. And then I have friends who have accounts too, and then like we'll do rides together. And so there's, like I said, there's community there, but it's like kind of on demand, which I really like, especially at this point in my life. So but I ride
Yeah.
about 3 or 4 times a week. I'm not a super
Hmm.
hardcore. I know people that have done a Peloton ride every day for like 3 years. I don't have that level of commitment, but I do
Hmm.
like it. And I'm sad when I
Yeah.
don't get to do it. So
By the way, if you're a marketing leader or a business owner and you want to start your reading habit, the Essential Marketer's Reading Checklist, the best books on business and marketing that you can browse through, test drive, see if you like, included difficulties, page summaries, actionable quotes, and a link to the cheapest place online if you want to buy it and read the whole thing for yourself. Literally a place to test drive a library of all the most helpful books on business without having to buy it beforehand and give you a chance if you want to see if you like it. First link in the description. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's what we'll talk about too, is like so much of this stuff is community and sharing. And I think like if you can empower yourself to share or look to others who are doing something that you're trying to improve upon. So, and there's a correlation there with like fitness and career and even,
yeah,
marketing in general, is that there's these people that we're all trying to solve like these same problems, whether it's health and fitness or whether it's career or looking for a job. I think putting yourself out there with other people that are trying to solve the same ones and just like bouncing ideas off of each other, just letting yourself know that you're not alone in doing that. I think it goes a really long way. I think it's kind of understated,
Yeah.
to be honest. So, but yeah, I'd love to give you like a springboard into kind of like telling your own story. And I know I prefaced on it a little bit. We had a chat a week and a half ago,
Yeah.
but as I research for these, because these are kind of like the highlights of my day, I started to like almost get nervous in myself a little bit because you've been in just like so many publications. Your content is very good. You're very consistent with it. You practice what you preach, and you've been featured in like a lot of. I'm not going to list them off because, like I said, there is some very well-known ones, and we'll read that in the intro. But there are a very lot of well-known publications. You're very successful. So I'd love to give you a springboard to kind of talk about how you got started in marketing, your career. There's so many interesting little tidbits I'm sure we can pull on. But what's the TLDR?
Dilara TLDR. Oh gosh. I would say, a quick bio would be that I'm a marketer, a writer, and a human being that likes helping people. I'm fascinated with careers and workforce, and I think that's become a passion of mine in the last couple of years. But at my core, I'm a writer and a storyteller. And I know that might sound a little cliche now because a lot of people take that title seriously, but no, I seriously have been writing. I mean, my first piece got published in fourth grade, so I've always been a writer. Always been a storyteller. And I think now that content is in the forefront, a lot of people are paying attention to things, like you said, that I've said or created or done. And it's really awesome and rewarding and fascinating. And so at the end of the day, my goal is to just help others know a little bit more, learn a little bit more, and maybe even entertain them as they learn it.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And you have the multiple avenues for exercising those core principles.
Yeah.
Too, but I mean, I'd love to touch on like your approach to content personally because I think as a lot of this audience of the show is business owners, they're marketers. So a lot of it is, and you can talk about it in the lens of career and hedging yourself against building your own brand in terms of protecting your career, which is something that I think you would resonate with, and I think everyone should do to some extent. But also for marketing purposes. Is there any delineation you've seen because you have your own content, you manage content for other organizations, you have a career in marketing as well, so you're actually on the front lines, which is
Yeah.
cool. But how do you see people identifying how they should approach content based on their goals? Is that something they should be doing ahead of time, whether it's for marketing, whether it's for self branding? How important is it to kind of know what the end, have the end in mind before you kind of start doing it, or is it something you should just kind of dive into and figure it out as you go?
Andy, you asked a couple questions. You asked a question earlier that I want
I
to.
know I do that. I'm sorry.
Okay, is it
You
okay?
tack it one at a
You
time.
can edit this however you want. But
Yeah.
you asked an earlier question that I think is really important for a lot of marketers, and it's been a really, I want to say, almost like dangerous place to be when your personal brand gets absorbed into the professional brand that you're promoting. So as a
Mm,
human, I'm an Enneagram 8. I am all in. Like if I'm a part of
mm,
this, like I'm gonna lead it. I'm gonna buy the t-shirt. I'm gonna get the tattoo. I'm gonna be a part of it. And so I think early on in my career, that served me really well. I had a brand loyalty. I had an enthusiasm. I had almost like an irreplaceable cheerleading quality about me when I was working on marketing for certain companies that I was a part of. And that
mm,
really helped, me create good content, and it helped me engage with the brand in a unique way. But then what happens when your role's eliminated?
mm,
Your identity is stripped away. A huge part of your identity is stripped away. And that happened to me at one point in my career. My role was eliminated, and I literally woke up one day asking myself, like, what just happened? So that's when I started making a really thoughtful delineation between the work that I do and the content that I create for myself. And so going
mm,
out and doing my own, personal content, personal branding, I wanted to make sure that it was something I was super passionate about, that nobody could own but me. And so that's why I really felt passionate about talking about workforce insights and talking
mm,
about career advice to help other people maybe not make some of the same mistakes that I had made. And not that they were mistakes, they were lessons, but still they were learned the hard way. And if I could
mm,
provide advice or insight on experiences I had to help people, I was all for it. So as I started to evolve in my career, I started to be really thoughtful about, like, I can still give 100% to this job, but I don't have to give 100% of myself to this job. I don't have to buy the
Mm.
t-shirt, wear get the tattoo, be
Mm-hmm.
the number one cheerleader. I can still do good, really quality, good work. But I had to be really thoughtful about how much of myself, my personal self, I wanted to give to the organization. And I think that's what
Mm.
a lot of people struggle with in marketing, particularly because marketing becomes personal at some extent.
Mm-hmm.
Marketing, you're putting your fingerprints on the work that goes out there. And so I think really, really successful marketers have a really, really strong delineation between their personal brand and their professional brand. And I applaud them for that. I think for me,
Mm.
that's something that I've always been kind of trying to figure out and unlock. And so that's why I create that content that I create aside from marketing, because I do it for myself and it fulfills my own personal brand. But 9 to 5, I clock in and I'm still a great marketer. So you asked
Mm.
that question. I thought it was really, really compelling because I know I work with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of marketers from the career coaching perspective, and they're like, my identity is so wrapped up into the brand that I work for. If I leave this company, a piece of me dies with it. And that's a really, really tricky place
Mm.
to be in and a really,
Yeah.
really, really tough place to navigate, especially if
Yeah.
your job's eliminated and you had no control over it. If you're taking the
Right.
leap and deciding to leave, that's different. But with all of the layoffs that have happened in the last 5 years, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people have been really traumatized by that, particularly in marketing. So
Yeah,
that might be
no,
what I.
that's a really good point, and you see it like you see the examples on LinkedIn. People have their banner or their all their content will be about how where they work impact
Mhm.
is beneficial and how they're really banging the drum about that on social media. And companies, I mean, they can love that as much as they want, but then when there's no role for what you're doing anymore, you've built a house on sand, and that
Exactly.
can be scary. So that's a really good point, and I think like the delineation too. I love the point you made is separating who you are from what you do. And like during the day, you're able to lock in on providing your career equity value experience to this very specific company. But at the end of the day, they're the outlet for that creativity, for that career equity, but
Yeah.
they're not. They don't own you wholesale. And I think the only real exception to that is when you are a founder led company and you're kind of using your brand as the storytelling behind the engine that is your content.
Right.
Um, and I mean, you see so many good examples of that with, founder led brands nowadays, how they're getting traction on
Yeah.
social, all these channels. And that's awesome because you can tell I've loved just following you because we've got in touch a couple weeks ago, just seeing
Yeah.
your content and how, and I came across your LinkedIn a couple of days or your TikTok a couple of days ago too. You're crushing it on there too, which is
Right.
awesome.
Yeah.
But how do you? And I'd like to ask you specifically is how deliberate are you in planning your content, and do you see any? Because I mean, whether you're marketing your own business or you're marketing yourself, I think there's delineations you can take away. But how much like cross transfer have you seen between measuring like what's successful on a platform like TikTok and how you convert that to maybe an essay on LinkedIn? This is kind of a more tactical question,
Yeah.
but I think it's a really kind of helpful one to kind of unpack, is because you're doing very well on both, so it's interesting to see.
Yeah, and I want to preface with it didn't happen overnight. I've been
Mm-hmm.
posting on LinkedIn every day for over 3 years. I've been
Mm-hmm.
posting on TikTok nearly every day for over 3 years. So I have over
Wow.
30,000 followers on TikTok and I'm hopefully getting close to 10,000 here on LinkedIn. So, but I want to preface that with because I think when people see you have X amount of followers, it just happened overnight. It literally happened
Mm-hmm.
post by post, day by day.
Yeah.
It's definitely brick by brick that those audiences were built and it was intentional. So just to kind of answer a question you didn't ask, I think is a little preface to it though. The first thing for people to do is just start. I woke up
Mm-hmm.
one day, it wasn't a Monday, it wasn't like a day I had circled on my calendar in red ink. It was like I woke up one day and I said, I'm just gonna start posting on TikTok every day and see what happens. And I committed to 30 days. And I said, if I don't have like 100 followers by the end of the month, then I'm either not doing this right or this isn't for me. And by the end of the month, I had over 1,000 followers. And so that's when I
Hmm.
was like, I'm doing something right. Let me keep doing this. And then I took
Mm-hmm.
the same approach to LinkedIn. I just said, I'm going to commit to posting every day, Monday through Friday, for 30 days and just see what happens.
Mhm.
And again, I saw momentum happening there. So I think with any creator, the number one barrier, the number one challenge or problem is to just get started. You just
Mhm.
have to start somewhere. I have people ask me all the time, what did you do to get started? I didn't have some ceremony or like this map of content. I didn't sit down and plan everything out on the calendar. I literally woke up every day. And if you look at my TikTok, you can see there are videos where I haven't brushed my teeth. I just woke up first thing in the
Mhm.
morning, I got my glasses on, I'm wearing my pajamas, and I just post a
Mhm.
thought comes to mind. So someone once told me, if it's something that you can talk about at a party for 30 minutes nonstop that you're passionate about, that's probably a good content avenue for you to explore. And so that's
Mhm.
why I started going on that angle with of my content with workforce insights and resume help. So I just started, like I said, brick by brick, day by day. So for me now, I'm a little bit more planful. And that was because I identified who my audience was. At first, I just went in and let my audience
Mhm.
be. I had some misconceptions of who would gravitate towards my content, and I was wrong. So it's good
Mhm.
that I didn't invest a lot of time or energy into a strategy to plan that because it would have been wasteful. So
Mhm.
initially, my goal was to help early career professionals, either just graduating college or 3 years less in the workforce. They don't care about my content.
Mhm.
They don't. And I don't want to
Mhm.
say that like broadly, but like for the most part, they're like, look, I'm just trying to find an entry level job. Like this is just too much for me right now. And I get that.
Mhm.
My
Yeah.
sweet spot are those mid-level career professionals, people who have been in the workforce for 10 plus years. They've been at a company for a while. Either their role's been eliminated, like surprisingly out of nowhere, or they've realized, I just don't want to do this anymore. I want to try something new.
Mhm.
But the workforce, when they applied for their job 10 years ago, has shifted so much in the last decade that
Mhm.
they don't even know where to start. So that's where I
Yeah.
can help. But again, I didn't know that until I started posting content and saw what questions people were asking me, which posts they
Mhm.
were engaging on the most. And that started to dictate how I should talk about what I should talk about. And then there
Mhm.
is some cross promotional content on each platform. So if a post on LinkedIn performs really well, I might do a TikTok video of it. If a TikTok video
Mhm.
performs really well, vice versa. Um, but I am more planful now. I still wake up every morning and just do a TikTok, just willy nilly.
Mhm.
But on LinkedIn, I
Mhm.
do plan my posts out about a month ahead of time.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think like it's kind of like a chicken and the egg sort of thing when it comes to making your own content because you're right, the most important thing is getting started. Like if you can't build that habit, everything else is null, it's out of the window. But then you don't really become effective with it until you've put enough stuff out there to kind of see what people are resonating to you with. And
Right.
like I totally understand like the idea that you have of your idea, your ITC. I mean, you talk about that all the time, especially in
Right.
like marketing specifically, but you don't know that, and it could be totally different than what you even
Yeah.
imagined. So it really takes engaging and just having like a body of work, a volume of content, and also making it sustainable and enjoyable at the same time as well. So you have to kind of find that overlap between what you enjoy doing, what people get the most value out of, and kind of like meet that Venn diagram in the middle. And it's just constant iteration, but you have to build that habit of just like doing it every day, or maybe not every day if that's not your lifestyle, but just doing enough of it to get feedback.
Yeah, I think that there is a little bit of at first. I do say like just do it every day. Do it for 30 days. And if you can't
Hmm.
stand it, then it's probably not for you first of all.
Hmm.
But if you do it and you figure out you like it, good. And then you can pulse it down. I've taken breaks. I've adjusted my cadence here and there just based on life and like honestly my mental state. Some days I'm like, I just don't want to get on TikTok today. So I think that you can adjust as needed. But I think if you're getting started, give it a good 30 to 60 days, like commit to that. You can do anything for 30 days. You can do anything
Hmm.
for 30 days. We talked
Hmm.
about riding Peloton bikes earlier. You can commit to
Hmm.
anything for 30 days and see how it goes. And if you don't, you'll never know what the results are. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, just getting started, I think, is sometimes the biggest obstacle people have. They're afraid, what are people going to say? What are people going to think? And
Hmm.
I'm telling you, if it's good content, they're going to like it and they're going to think you're
Hmm.
awesome. So just do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're going to get better at it over time too.
Exactly.
But I want to give you a platform to talk about Totally Employable and kind of the work that you do over there and how that stemmed, because we talked about it a little bit last time, but how that stemmed out of a genuine not wanting to start a business, but a need that you actually saw, and also like your past experience. So I want to talk to you about kind of like the origins of that in the midst of you having a career and like you said, still being on the front lines.
Yeah.
So what's Totally
Yeah.
Employable? What is that?
So Totally Employable, I call it a workforce consultancy. So I help job seekers with their resume, and I do career coaching and job search strategies. I also help small companies. I would love to help larger ones work on their workforce strategy and their approach to talent attraction and acquisition.
Mhm.
So in a nutshell, people who are looking for a job that are having trouble finding a job, I help them write a good resume. I help them figure out their personal brand and elevator speech, and I give them tips on how to find a job. If they land an interview, I help them coach them through interviews and things like that too. For
Mhm.
companies, I help them write good job descriptions. I help them understand
Mhm.
what their talent pipeline should look like, and I help coach and advise them on benefits packages and employee handbooks. So
Mhm.
that stemmed out of, gosh, several years ago. I was working,
Mhm.
as a marketer, and a friend came up to me and said, "Hey, do you know so and so? I saw you guys are connected on LinkedIn. Could you pass my resume along to them? I'm interested in a job." And I
Mhm.
said, "Sure." And they sent me their resume. And I was a hiring manager at the time, so I'd seen a good bit of resumes come across my desk at that point. And I said, "Look, before I send this over, would you mind if I just like took a pass at it and did some edits for you? I feel like I know you, and I just feel like this resume does not really
Mhm.
like highlight your strengths as well as it should." And she said, "Sure, yeah, go for it." So I edited her resume, showed it to her. She said, "That looks great." I passed it over. She got hired. And so that's when something kind of clicked. And then she told a couple friends I helped her with their resume. And then those couple friends asked me to help. And it started to snowball into this resume writing thing I was doing on the side for several years. And probably in the last, like, I guess 5 years since COVID, I started really amping up Totally Employable and making it a thing, which was
Mhm.
kind of scary because being a business owner is something else in its own world and life.
Mhm.
And like the most, I guess, like hesitant business owner out there, like I like having this as a
Mhm.
passion project. I mean, it's definitely a business, it's an LLC, I pay taxes, all that stuff, but it's definitely its own thing, and I want to keep it that way. I like having a full-time job as a marketer because that keeps me in touch with what's going on in the marketing world. I'm still passionate about it and love it, and
Mhm.
Totally Employable kind of scratches that itch for me to help people and still be engaged with what's going on in the workforce. And if it
Mhm.
ever became a full-time job, I would be concerned that I would have to take work just to take it. So I don't know. I think a lot of entrepreneurs wrestle with that as their business starts to grow into something. If they're listening and have advice, please call me, find me. I want to know because I get approached all
Mhm.
the time, like, why don't you just make this a full-time thing? And
Mhm.
there's something that's just making me pause, and I don't know what it is. But in the
Mhm.
meantime, I'm still here to help people, and still available to offer support.
Yeah, and that's the whole foundational principle because you don't think about it when beforehand. But I don't know if you've ever read the E Myth by Michael Gerber,
Mm-mm.
but it's basically it's like the entrepreneurial myth. So it's the person that starts the pie baking business because they want to bake pies all day. When you realize that once you change the incentives of what you're doing, it changes the dynamics of the entire thing altogether. So you're no longer, saying yes to something because it has sheer joy attached to it. Like, for example, you're no longer doing branding and designing websites all day because
Yeah,
you enjoy doing it. You're doing it because you have to pay rent and you have to, put food on the table. And you find like even in the process of doing that, then you start to rush, you start to think like, okay, I'm doing this for an outcome rather than, the sheer joy of what lies on the other side.
yeah,
And then just kind of like this creeping up anxiety around like everything you do. And you feel the pressure to perform and to make it deliver value rather than just sticking true to your process and trusting yourself.
yeah,
So
yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that can come up when the business becomes the main thing,
Right.
and that's why I think there's a fine line between people will tell you shiny object syndrome. You need to focus on one thing and become really good at doing that thing versus like you kind of talked about, you have the career in marketing. You can give yourself 100% to the job while you're there, use it as an avenue to provide value to those people that you're
Right.
working for and that you've given your voice to. But then you can also do self improvement on the side and build this thing that you always have as an asset,
Hmm.
and you, at the same time, not worry about having to tie everything to it at the same time. So
Yeah.
there's definitely that. Like I said, it's so the grass is always greener
Yes.
because I used to work at an agency before I went full time on the business, and I just spent the whole day wondering like, and this is probably something that goes into like wanting to have a full time job versus sticking in the business full time is if you have a good job and you're internally fulfilled, then it makes the decision a lot easier. You're coming from a place of abundance,
Right.
But a lot of us are, especially people that are just starting their careers, whether it's in marketing, and this might be helpful just for your kind of customer feedback and knowing your audience as well, is that a lot of them are coming from like a place of lack, and that's why there's so much rush and stuff like involved in getting into a job that feels like I need to get out of this situation now.
Right.
So I think like covering that foundation and being like fulfilled at a job, feeling like you're adding value, and also just getting better at what you do too, is just sets you up for so much success because it allows you to put more into whatever that side passion is, and also do it better because not everything's going to be tied to it. And if you happen to
Yeah.
be hasty into jumping into something full time, so I love your approach to that as well, and
Yeah.
I think
And
that's really very healthy.
it gives me the privilege to say no. And I think
Hmm.
that's like another thing. Jason Fried, that one of the co-founders of Basecamp, wrote this thing like the power of no. And
Hmm.
so I think if you have something that is putting food on the table and paying the rent, you have to say yes all the time. But
Hmm.
to keep it in a place where you have the privilege to say no. And honestly, I had the privilege of saying no. I had a TikTok post blow up last week, and I got inundated with so many requests for resumes that people wanted written like in the next 2 weeks, and I just didn't have capacity, and I had the privilege to say
Hmm.
no. I said, I'm sorry, I'm at
Hmm.
capacity. Here's some tools and resources you can have for free to help you. If you feel like you need someone, I'm happy to make a referral. If you want to wait till January, because I want to take off some time at the end of the year and spend it with my family. And like, I just didn't
Hmm.
have the capacity to take on all of these new clients. So I had to say no.
Hmm.
And it was empowering because it allowed me to say yes to other things that I needed to say yes to. So,
Yeah, and also like the power of a referral too. I
yeah.
know like I just had an experience lately where I could actually felt comfortable passing off work because I mean, good lord, like you feel like you have to say yes to everything. And
Right.
I was kind of in that season of life when we talked about that a little bit in our first chat.
Yeah.
Is always taking the coffee, always saying yes.
Hmm.
But then when it comes to your own self detriment, knowing what that line is, because it can be impactful to other people too. So you want to be sure you're being mindful of other people's priorities and time. But passing off a branding project to the lady that trained me at my old job, and just looping them in an email, seeing like them build a relationship. That was something that was really internally fulfilling, and I think
Yeah.
it takes kind of seeing the value in that for other people that makes you okay, like dipping your toe in the water of saying no and passing up on things to really see the value in it. So that's very top of mind for me as well. But
Well, and the beauty of that
um,
was they needed help, and I was able to help them. I just wasn't the person that helped them. So everyone still
mm,
won, right? I was able to help them. They got the help they needed. I just wasn't executing it. So,
yep, awesome. That's a really good mindset.
yeah.
But I love to give you like a platform too to talk about some of maybe the harder times. I think that's a good kind of dovetail when we talk about like having a scarcity mindset sometimes. I know you have been through the hardship, and I think that's a big part of. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's a big part of why you're able to put so much into other people now is because you have come from a place where you didn't have it all, and you can very much empathize with not just the career struggles, but maybe some of the personal and health struggles that others have gone through.
Yeah.
So what's kind of your backstory in terms of going through hard times?
Yeah. So, I mean, everyone has, like you said, everyone has a hardship in their life and their career, sometimes more than one, sometimes, multiple. But
Mm.
around 5 years ago, in the middle of COVID, the pandemic shutdowns, I was diagnosed with cancer. And that was just a really pivotal time in my life. I had this like VP title. I was living my best life. It was great. Everything was great. And when COVID hit, I'm like, awesome. I get to slow down and spend time with my family. I'm going to try all these new recipes. I'm going to get a sourdough starter. So I even still had this, positive mindset during the COVID-19 lockdowns. But then when I was diagnosed with cancer, I just was going for a routine checkup, and luckily my doctor found it. I always feel really grateful that my doctor found it, because usually if the patient finds it, it's advanced to a more serious stage. So we found it, we caught it
Mm-hmm.
early, and I had to went through 3 surgeries, 20 rounds of chemo, and 30 rounds of radiation. So about 6 months of treatment,
Wow.
all during COVID. And this is when our kids are home 100% because of the pandemic. So we're homeschooling them. I lost my hair, my eyelashes, my nose hair. We weren't allowed to be around others. We were in a extreme isolation, which I know everyone's mental health really suffered during COVID because of that isolation, but mine was just a whole other layer when my doctor said, cancer might not kill you, but COVID will. So, you had to go to
Mm-hmm.
chemo by yourself. It was just a lot of really tough stuff. And during that experience, it definitely shined a really bright spotlight on what's the most important things in my life. And that was my husband, my kids, my family, and my really close friends. It's amazing to see the people who showed up for me and my family and supported us during that time. And it just really gave me perspective. And so coming out of COVID and coming out of cancer, I definitely had a different perspective, number one, on values and priorities, but I also had a changed perspective on health. And you and I were talking earlier about like working out and fitness. And, when I
Mm-hmm.
was younger, to me, health was, running an 8-minute mile and going to
Mm-hmm.
yoga times a week and eating an
Mm-hmm.
acai bowl for breakfast. Those things are healthy. And I did those things. And those things served me well because I was strong enough to survive 6 months of chemo and radiation. Not many
Mm-hmm.
people could take on that much of a dosage. But
Mm-hmm.
now coming out of it, health to me is a lot different. Health to me is not being stressed out, not inviting stress into my life, being really mindful about how much we take on, making sure that I spend quality time with my family, still moving my body every day, still eating healthy and drinking water, making sure there's enough time for rest. So I think health has taken on a new perspective for me too, and particularly mental health, just because until that experience, I didn't realize how tightly those two things were intertwined. And now that I am on the other side of it, I'm a big mental health advocate and supporter coming out of that experience, and I have a whole new perspective that I hope to bring to everything that I do in my life now. And with
Mm-hmm.
that is, like we said earlier, like the power of being able to just say no and not feel guilty about it. I don't have to say
Mm-hmm.
yes to everything. I don't have to take on everything. I'd rather say yes to one thing that matters. And make a difference to one person than say yes to a bunch of things that don't matter and not get anything done. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, that
No,
was a big
that's
changing point in my life.
no, that's awesome. I mean, even like we were talking about too, like you see the highlights, social media, and like like even as I was researching and when we met at Dawson, you
Yeah,
see the confident person on stage, and you think like, wow, everything's perfect, and yeah, I think that transparency side of things not just makes it easier to work with, like as
yeah,
from a, like humanization is such a big part, and I think that's how the people that are successful with content are able to somehow, and people bang the drum about authenticity and being vulnerable, and it's almost like a fish in water because you can't actually explain it or experience it until you have actually gone through it and you actually experience it.
yeah,
But like I said, there's the part of that is you have your brand around being confident and being directing towards other people and giving advice. But then you can say like, okay, I've also been through this, like
yeah,
very challenging
yeah,
time, and I'm coming from a place where I can empathize and understand. So.
yeah. And for those, resume clients, like I've been laid off before. I get it. It's tough. Um, and I've had health challenges and financial burdens and all the things. We all do. Like you said, we don't talk about it. It's the highlight reel. And just to give you
Mm-hmm.
like a really perfect example, um, the last day I finished my active cancer treatment, my radiation, we were at the Bing, and you like ring the bell and everyone takes a picture,
Mm-hmm.
and there's like a picture of me like ringing the bell, and my hair
Yeah.
was starting to grow back. I had this like super super short like buzz cut, and
Mm-hmm.
it was just like such this like, oh my gosh, everything's, you're done now, life's going back to
Mm-hmm.
normal. But what people don't realize is like life wasn't going back to normal. I was still going through treatment. I was still going through a lot. So like
Mm-hmm.
I posted that picture on social media that night, and the next morning I woke up and I couldn't get out of bed. I cried for like an hour. I was crippled
Mm-hmm.
with depression. And I called my doctor, and she said, "Oh yeah, this is totally normal." I'm like, "Why didn't you tell me?" I didn't
Yeah.
plan for that. I didn't know. And so as I'm basically, mourning the loss of this weird life I had been living for 6 months that I didn't ask for through treatment, all of the likes and comments are pinging on my social media page. Congratulations, you did
Mm-hmm.
it. Like everyone's celebrating. And I was just unable to get out of my bed because I was crippled with depression.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, the highlight reels, that's what everyone shows. Someone once told
Yeah.
me, social media will show your best self, Google will show your true self. And I thought that was funny. So sometimes I Google
Mm.
myself for
Yeah.
a reality check to see like
Mm-hmm.
what's the world
Mm-hmm.
thinking of me or what, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think sometimes we get too caught up in the highlight reels. And I'm a big proponent of, like you said, like just meeting people in real life. Like let's go back to analog sometimes too.
Yeah, I mean that's there. Yeah, there's a big value in that because you'll see even too like the perception that you build up in your head can sometimes be so much different and very because you'll see someone on social media, you'll follow them, eventually you get on a call, something like that. And one of the biggest metrics I'm looking for is okay, like how consistent is just my perception of the written content, the video content, the photos versus what's my lived experience of it, face to face conversationally. And I
Mhm.
try to make that for myself as consistent as I possibly can. And I think there's a value to having video content that really communicates effectively, and that's why I'm so bullish on it, is just having something where you can speak. And also longer form content too is something that I'm very passionate about, is knowing the full dialogue, what's going
Yeah.
on, the full story, and then using the social media as ways to get people to uncover more and unpack more and kind of go through that discovery journey. Like, what would that look like if someone comes across me for the first time? Okay, like what's your impression? And I think like one of the biggest things that I found when I connect with other content creators, marketers, or founders is like something that they really appreciate is like just a transparent view of my perception of them having came across them organically. Just
Yeah.
saying like, okay, look, like listen, as someone that found you on LinkedIn and then now meeting a new person, this is my perception. Like people really appreciate that because it's literally no matter who you are, that's something that you cannot generate for yourself. Like you can't, no matter how much money, how big your team is, how much money you put into your content, you can't actually generate that perspective. It's like being a fish in water. So I think
I
feedback is really important.
Yeah. I'm gonna take everyone back into like a time machine real quick. So I don't know,
Hmm.
Andy, you probably weren't even alive when the first Real World came out on TV. But it was like groundbreaking. It was the first reality show. No one had ever done this before, and there were some women on the show, and one of them's name was Becky, and she's like, everyone's making me out like that I'm like some mean person. She's like, everyone's like, the crew is like editing and cutting all of the film to make it look like I'm mean. And Heather
Hmm.
B, who is like a very truth teller, she's like, they're working with what you gave them. She's like, work with what you gave them. If that's the
Yeah.
film that they have of you and that's all they have to edit and cut down, then that's who you are.
Hmm.
And they're working with what you gave them. And that always stuck with me. Like, people are going
Hmm.
to work with what you give them. So if you're not being genuine, if you're not being transparent, if you're talking about something you don't know about, if you're, just, I don't know, people are going to work with
Hmm.
what you give them. And even when you're in control of the content, even when you're editing it and you're making it what it is, they're still going to read between the lines and see the authenticity that exists. So for
Hmm.
me, I don't know. I'm trying to help people. I provide this advice. It's yours for free. Take it or leave it. I hope it
Hmm.
helps. But I always have like Heather B's words ringing in my head. She's like, they work with what you give them. And I think that,
Yeah.
I mean, that advice is probably 30 years old and it still rings true today.
Yeah, no, that's true too, because you can do the best you can to kind of manufacture the ideal version of yourself, but things can slip through the cracks, especially when you commit to being consistent with it and posting every day.
Yeah.
And you have to know like what your North Star is and why you're doing it. And just not be afraid to show behind the scenes because eventually, if you're committing to posting every day, if you're committing to like showing your true authentic self, it's going to come out no matter what.
Yeah.
So kind of like clearing the skeletons in the closet and just saying like, okay, this is who I am. Take me or
Yeah.
leave me. Yeah, it's a vulnerable position, but it's a good one to be in.
Yeah, and admit and be aware that you're going to make mistakes because you're going to learn. You're learning as you go along, but how you embrace those mistakes is going to define you. And
Hmm.
I've made mistakes like on TikTok, like I've recommended stuff and people are like, this is wrong. And I don't delete the video. I comment on the video. I create a new post. I'm like, you know what? I researched what you recommended, and you're right. You have a better suggestion than I do. I want to make sure everyone hears it. So
Hmm.
I think that that's a really important part if anyone's going into content creation is just making sure that you're going to make mistakes, and when you do, the more you embrace and own them, the more authentic you are too. I mean, we're all human here.
Yeah, this has been great. Yeah, so good. I want to I'm trying to do kind of the Tim Ferriss thing. If you don't know what that is, it's basically the zooming out and zooming back in. So telling your story and then getting like as a zoom out and then you zoom back in with some like tactical insights people can take away. I don't do it as well as he does, but we can all try.
We'll do
But
it. We'll do it.
yeah, one day. But when you talk about, do you have any like very funny real world stories or applications of things that you've seen on the job? I know we told one at Dawson in relations to maybe doing some free work. But have you had any like interesting interview or resume stories that have come up just and all the conversations that you've had in your career that you think people might be able to resonate with or get behind? Because I know people bond very well with stories, and the ones that you've told so far have really like sold me on your credibility and just you as a person. So I'd love to give you a platform and talk about those too.
Thanks. Gosh, I've got a lot of stories. I will. I actually I want to share a story. I actually shared this with the Columbus Young Professionals Club like about a month ago, and it really resonated with a lot of people. So if you don't mind, I'll share a story early on in
Go
my
for it.
so early on in my career, I graduated from Youngstown State and I moved down here in hopes of getting a job. My roommate moved with me and I was super confident I'm going to land a job before she does, right? I graduated cum laude. I studied abroad in 2 countries. I had 2 internships. I did all the things. I was in all the clubs, very highly decorated, like fluent in Spanish, all the things, right? And then my roommate, love her to death, she had like a 2.8 GPA. She had a business degree, so I thought, and not that it was a competition, but we both were eager to get
Yeah.
jobs right away so we could pay our rent. And I thought, I'm going to be like the breadwinner. I'm going to find the job right away. So about 2 weeks after we got here, she landed a job. And to this day, she still works for that company. So I went on multiple interviews. I was bartending to make ends meet. And I got called for an interview to do marketing for an ice cream company. And I was so pumped. This is like a dream come true. And I'm going to preface, it's not Jenny's. Everyone asks if it's Jenny's. Jenny's, I'm too old. It's Jenny's was not even. So I got this interview, this ice cream company, and I was super pumped. I met the guy who's the marketing director, shook his hand, had a great interview. I felt a connection with him. And I walked out of there like 3 feet off the ground. I'm like, he's going to call me and I'm going to get this job. I just know it. I can feel it. So he calls me and he says, hey, I really liked our interview. Could you come back in and meet the marketing assistant I have? Because you'd be working side by side with her. Just want to do, a check to make sure you fit in with the group. Come back the next day. I meet her. Her name is Karen. My roommate's name is Karen. I'm like, this is meant to be. Like, this is like a sign that in that ice cream Karen and I, like, we hit it off right away. And she said, sometimes it gets really busy at the ice cream shops and we have to go scoop ice cream. Are you okay with that? I said, yes, I love that. She said, also, we need to change the signs out. Are you good at like writing with chalk? And I said, yes. I used to work at a grocery store. I did the chalk signs there. Like, I am the person for this. So at the end, we didn't even shake hands. Like, we hugged. I'm like, I'm getting this job. This is going to set me on a trajectory to be the world's best ice cream marketer. And the marketing director, shook my hand, said, I'm going to give you a call tomorrow and we'll take it from there. I said, okay, sounds great. So the next day I get a call. And as soon as I pick up the phone, he says, this isn't the conversation I thought we'd be having. And I said, oh, he said, I'm sorry, but I'm not able to offer you the job. And my heart was just broken. And I didn't ask for feedback. I was too shocked, too stunned to so we hung up the phone and then I locked myself in my bedroom and cried for 5 days. And I couldn't even eat ice cream to drown my sorrows because it reminded me of the place and I couldn't get. So needless to say, a couple years later, not years later, gosh, not years later, a couple of weeks, months later, I ended up getting a job, a full-time job, my first big girl job out of college. And then I'm set on my trajectory for my career. About 10 years later, I'm speaking at the Women's Marketing Summit and I was doing a keynote speech and it was great. I get off the stage and I see the guy from the ice cream company there. And he goes, Dilara, I think I remember you. I said, yeah. I said, I interviewed with you 10 years ago. He's like, your name sounded familiar. He's like, great speech. Just wanted to come and say, great job. I said, thanks. And he said, I remember calling you. I was so disappointed. I really wanted to hire you, but I wasn't able to because we had to hire from within. We were promoting someone from within. And I said, oh, sounds great. No problem, whatever. So we're mingling around at the event. And then, I bump into him again and he was with a colleague and he introduced me to the colleague, this marketing coordinator that he hired 10 years ago.
Yeah,
The
Karen.
person that got the job that I cried over. And I thought to myself, that wasn't rejection, that was
Mm-hmm.
redirection. If I would have taken that job, I probably would have been an ice cream marketing coordinator for my whole entire life, which isn't a bad thing. But
Mm,
that wasn't the goal that I had for myself when I started off in my career. So it was just a real watershed moment. And she was a lovely person and it worked out
mm-hmm.
the best for everybody. But I think sometimes when we're looking for a job, we get so involved in the process. And it's so heartbreaking if it doesn't work out. And we want to
Mm-hmm.
know, I want feedback. What did I do wrong? What can you tell me? And at the end, there was nothing he could have told me that day that he called me that would have changed anything for me in the trajectory of
Mm,
my career. And actually, it's good that I didn't know because it just fueled me to strive for more and to push myself further. So whenever I talk to people who are like facing a big rejection, I'm like, sometimes it's not rejection, sometimes it's redirection. And you
mm-hmm.
have to recognize it as such in the moment because that's what's going to help you move forward. And
Yeah.
I also believe, and I want to give a shout out to Elizabeth Blount McCormick. She told me this saying a million years ago: no leads to a better yes. And in
Mm-hmm.
that case, I got a no, and it took me to a great place that I'm happy to be in, and everything worked out for everybody involved. So I always like
Mm-hmm.
to share that story with people who are getting a lot of no's, especially
Mm-hmm.
in today's market in the job force workforce. It's really hard. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just always say no leads to a better yes, and that's a great example of how.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. And I think you have to apply that to everything in life, like
Oh yeah,
whether it's career, whether it's, I mean, people talk about like founders and business owners are like some of the most persistent people because they just know you have that prerequisite in the beginning is the only way if I fail is if I stop.
right,
And if you take that no as a signal that you should stop, that's the only way you can fail.
right,
And that's so true in every area. Is if something doesn't do well, something doesn't perform well, the conversation doesn't resonate. It's like, okay, well, just because it didn't have this end result that I narrowly defined in my mind as success, that doesn't mean it was a failure, you know.
right,
And it takes removing yourself from that a little bit and seeing these cases of it happen to be able to, because I think in the moment the emotions come up, you're like, oh man, no, rejection. It's so hard to detach from that and see like the bigger picture. But I
right.
think it's stories like that and seeing it over and over again that can kind of help make it more recognizable in real time.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
too sometimes it's about timing, it's about just things that are out of your control. And so the faster you take that no and allow yourself to move forward, the faster you're going to get to your yes. And yeah, I mean there is like a
Hmm.
level of persistence that you need to have, but also, I did lock myself in my room and cry for 5 days, for not getting that job. Like I
Hmm.
still allowed myself to process it. And I think that's an important piece of the journey too is acknowledgement and processing things when they're tough.
Hmm.
Because that also allows you to perceive and process the next opportunity to make sure if it's a right fit or not. Because maybe it's a yes, but maybe it's not the right yes. And so I think that's an
Hmm.
important thing too, especially for job seekers. They're like, I just want a job right now. And they'll run into an opportunity
Hmm.
that's maybe doesn't check off all the boxes. Maybe a little red flag snuck up on them. They thought, well, the owner seems like kind of a jerk. Even in the interview
Hmm.
process, they take the job anyway and it ends up being a
Yeah.
disaster and not a good fit, and they're back at
Hmm.
square one 3 months later. So I always just tell people, sometimes there's a yes, maybe it's not the right
Hmm.
yes too. I mean, you have to
Hmm.
be able to have enough self-awareness to understand how to recognize those things.
Yes, self awareness. That's the biggest thing too. Is like feedback, and because it's some people take no as a sign that they should reset their own expectations. So when people are facing no after no after no, whether it's in job, whether in their job, whether it's in things that their work aren't resonating with your stakeholders or whatever, if you take no and you take maybe a lack of what you think the outcome of success was as a sign that you should dial back and start to accept a lower standard or whatever, you eventually reach a point where feedback is no longer helpful. You're just taking it as detriment. You're taking it the total wrong way. So that's why you said it 100%. It's like having the self awareness to realize that no doesn't mean that I'm not capable of accomplishing what I want. It means that this role wasn't the way of manifesting that and realizing that.
Right.
I think that delineation is so important. It's so hard to see in the moment. It's almost like a fish in water. It's so
It's
crazy.
hard. It's hard, especially like I said, for job seekers, because like I said, the market's tough. There are a lot of really talented people out there and they just want to know why. but at the end of the day, it's not going to make them, it's usually not feedback that you can use. It's like, because we
Right.
hit the boss's son. Okay. I have nothing,
Yeah.
there's no like skill I need to develop, or there was nothing that like that I could improve upon from that feedback. So I always approach interview feedback cautiously, and I tell people I work with too. I'm like, sometimes you get it and sometimes you don't. If they're willing to give it, usually there's something you could work with, but if you have to chase it down, it's usually out of your control.
Yeah.
So, keep doing what you're
It's
doing and keep seeking that yes.
Yeah, it's a nice to have for sure. And the people that do have the self awareness to ask, like I told you about the layoff in February, and I had the self awareness between emotional outbursts to ask, like, is there any, what can I do better? What can I improve on? And the feedback I got was, if I could use the exact words, was, we need you to find out who Andy is. And I was like, in the moment, like maybe a lot of explicit language came to my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about it now, and I'm just like, not much I could have done with that. Like you can
Right.
take anything to mean a million different things, but if you look at, and that's why I'm big at like aligning incentives and seeing where people are coming from. There, people that are going through layoffs, or people that are just concerned about the job, are trying to make it as pain free as possible, whether it's the interaction in that moment or it's just the felt lived experience for you as the
Right.
person that maybe isn't taking it the best.
Right.
So I agree 100%. Take that with a grain of salt. But this has been great, dude. Like I said, I want to be very mindful of your time because I very much appreciate and
Yeah.
value your time as well. But I'd love to give you a chance to shout out where people can find you, to get in touch, what platforms. I know there's a lot of them that
Yeah.
for people to reach you at, but
I just
where
stick
where
to
people
two.
find you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm on LinkedIn, Dilara Casey. You can also find me on TikTok, Dilara Casey, and then I use the handle Totally Employable. Those are the two best places to find me from a content perspective. And then if you just Google totallyemployable.com, you'll find me too. So that's my website. It just lists my services and a couple testimonials. But also, shameless plug, when we talked about things we do for ourselves, I did write my first novel, and it's dropping this month. So if anyone ever wants to see some stuff that I write that's not job related, I have a novel that I wrote. So it's called Wherever You Go. So you can find that on Amazon and at the